What is up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. I'm excited to be with you on another podcast episode. Apologize for the voice. Kids get you sick, and then your throat starts acting weird. So apologize for that, but it's just the way it is, and the show moves forward. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for liking this. Thanks for sharing it with a friend. All of that good stuff helps us out in this weird world of the internet. So appreciate that. I'm always surprised who gives us a listen, and my guest is no exception. So I bring on a past student of ours who actually first heard about Civil Engineering Academy through our podcast, as I've talked about becoming a transmission engineer. And so because he wanted to be a transmission engineer, he fell into that world. And with that, we also helped him pass his PE exam. So I bring on a guest, Seth Anderson. He works for TRC. He graduated from school in New York, and then he moved to Oregon to take his PE exam. And he's been crushing it in this utility world. So he now works doing underground transmission, which is a whole nother world. Maybe we'll bring him on for another episode talking about that and why that's such a cool world too. But without spilling all the beans, he shares his exam experience on how he prepared to take the geotechnical PE exam, what that was like for him, what he thought was a challenge, areas that he shares where you definitely will learn some great information on preparing for this exam. And so we wanted to talk about that. So I'm going to shut up and we'll get to my interview with Seth. He shares all the good details on his journey in becoming a professional engineer. And I think you're going to enjoy this if you're working towards becoming a PE, no matter which exam you're taking. So there's great tips in here for anybody. So without further ado, let me get to that. And it's coming right up with Seth. See you in a minute. All right. We're rocking and rolling, Seth. Thanks for joining me today on the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. Appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, of course, Isaac. Thanks for reaching out. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm super excited for you. I know you just recently passed your PE exam, and that's a huge milestone. So, and the other thing we kind of connect with is being in the utility world. So I think that's awesome.
Definitely.
But I don't want to spill the beans on that. But I usually like to, start these out. You describing what your background is and what you're doing for work these days.
Yeah. So I'm a non-traditional student. So I started in the kind of restaurant world and migrated over to civil engineering for studying. Have a concentration in structural and construction engineering management. And then now I'm actually working as an underground transmission line engineer. So the process between that, we'll dive in a little bit, but it was a unique experience that I accidentally fell into, and I've become more in love with it as I show up to work every day. So it's been exciting.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So maybe we'll dive into that a little bit, but how did you even discover you wanted to become a transmission engineer, or kind of dive into that utility kind of world?
Yeah, so it was actually at a career fair where I applied for more of exposure and practice to get my elevator pitch down when I wanted to reach out to more structural based conferences. And one of the conferences there, or one of the companies I was talking to, was TRC, and it happened to be something that really excited me because I didn't even know civil engineers did this. I thought it was all electrical engineers that took care of this world. So after I got off the phone with them, I started researching and kind of went through a little bit of rabbit holes to find information. And then that's when I came across your first video to find out that you used to utilities and kind of still are part of that world, but of the overhead transmission. So that got me more excited. And then I found out that civil engineers stamp most of the projects inside of the transmission world, and electrical engineers just kind of make sure it's safe and it's not going to do any harm to the environment past what we stamp off on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you found that career path. You've been in there. It sounds like you're enjoying it and thriving in it.
Yeah.
So take me through the journey then of, I assume you found Civil Engineering Academy because you found that transmission podcast and started listening that way.
That is correct. Yeah. So it was right around the same time of finding you doing an explanation of transmission line engineering. Then I kind of clicked down what you were a part of, and then found the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. And that's what I kind of listened to through my junior and senior year, where it was giving me a larger understanding of what civil engineers were able to do. So it's in school, they tell you kind of have like 4 or 5 options, but they don't tell you that those 5 options branch out into another 100 different fields you can go inside of. So it was really cool to just have more exposure with that.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you found us. That's exciting. someone's listening to this podcast out there in the world.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting it out there. It definitely helped me.
Well, take us through your journey of preparing for your PE exam, and maybe back up a little bit. I assume you took your FE while you were in school. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Yeah. So I'm in Oregon right now, and I was going to Clarkson School in New York. So I took that exam during my senior spring semester. So then I moved out to Oregon where you're allowed to take it early. So I'm 2 years into experience right now. And then I'll take the exam again for California for the seismic and survey one as well. So my basis was I wanted to get the FE out as soon as I could while still in school. And then I didn't really have an intention of studying for the PE right away. And my supervisor said, why don't you give it a shot? I think you could figure it out. And then my wife said, well, it might be really cool if you pass before you have a kid. So then I kind of signed up for classes and went after everything. And I started with another platform and I didn't feel very prepared afterwards. So I needed a little bit more exposure. So that's when I remembered the podcast and I dove into the materials that is offered on CEA. And it became very apparent that I needed to study a lot more. So the amount of questions that you gave available to students through the depth book, the conceptuals, the CBT was incredible. I mean, in just those 2 booklets, there was 200 questions for Geo alone. And I think I ended up making like 400 or 500 flashcards out of it. So you'd have a question and I wouldn't know what any of the answers were. So that all of a sudden became 5 questions out of one of them or 5 flashcards. So then I just started ripping through those. And then for the last probably 2 weeks, all I did was practice problems and like practice exams, timing, and everything. So I wanted to study with a base of 3 minutes per question. So that gave me enough time when I showed up to the exam. Even if I felt like I was falling behind, I looked at the clock and it'd be like 4.5 minutes. So I still had an extra minute and a half to spare on some of these questions. So I finished the first part and I had an hour and a half left, and I used that entire hour and a half to review my material and everything. And then when I finished the exam, I had another 2 hours, but I stayed there the whole time and double checking references, answers, making sure, for all I know, I passed by 1 question, but I passed and I felt very confident going through the whole thing because CEA allowed me to go inside and outside and reverse questions. So conceptually, I could handle the 3 levels of conceptual questions that they're asking me.
That's great. I mean, we try hard to prepare you for that. Theory stuff comes up all the time. Was that a surprise? I don't know what your exam experience was like with theory questions.
There was a lot of Wolverine. Yeah, the Geotech had probably 70 to 80 questions that were conceptual, and I didn't have to use my calculator very often. And it wasn't a conceptual of kind of what would be better, A or B. It would be, so if this is happening and this occurs and you only are limited to this, how do you solve the answer? So you had to understand what the levels of construction were while also understanding what the limitations were that were available to you at the moment. So it was more involved than I thought they were going to be.
That's amazing. What do you think was the most challenging part for you in preparing for your PE exam?
When you first start, the amount of material that is supplied by NECs is a little overwhelming. I think there's between 10 and 15 different volumes with the new computer-based test formatting that they're due. And the hardest part was understanding how to navigate those, how to look through what they were supposed to do. So that was the biggest challenge, was just starting the process of studying.
So, in terms of like giving tips for the next person preparing for this, did you, as part of the course, we give kind of a homework planner of sorts to help get you through the course and
Awesome.
kind of set goals doing those. But what was that helpful to you, or did you do anything in addition in terms of preparing and planning for your own prep?
Yeah, great question. So I broke it down. Initially, I opened up each of the books and I compared the indexes of what they were and the table of contents to see what was the same and what was different. And then it kind of broke it down that there's 3 main manuals that you have to use. So it's 1609, 1610, and the 072 book. And your computer-based test exam, once I got to it, it helped me understand how I could search through the different kind of manuals and so really I remembered like the last 3 numbers of each of the manuals, and that was easier than me remembering the 10-digit number and the name. So I was able to break it down a little bit smaller bite-sized pieces.
Save some brain space.
Yeah, you need everything you can find.
So let's I kind of want to hit on those practice exams. So it sounds like you took our CBT exam. Did you find that helpful in your prep, and when did you take it?
I did. So I took that, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks beforehand, and I did not pass the CBT exam. So I was at the 60-ish range. And what was great was after the exam, the breakdown of questions allowed me to understand the resources better and how to study and where I was a little bit weak. So I was close enough that I wasn't panicking at this point, but I knew I still had to study a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's probably a pretty good indicator. Like a lot of times I get this question, and maybe you can help me answer it. But if you're doing practice exams, what should students be shooting for on a practice exam?
Oh man, this number's all over the place. So it's a little dangerous to answer. But if you're getting somewhere between like 65 and 85, but you understand how to use the resources and what the questions are asking you, I think you can still have confidence going into the exam. And when I was getting lower grades, it was because I was doing a miscommunication on the calculator or I was misreading a question. So you have to slow down a little bit. So if you're generally in the point where you're hitting at least 70 and kind of going above, but you believe in the material, I think that's a good starting point to have confidence in yourself before you go into the exam.
Okay, that's good. Um, how did your workplace support you on this journey to pass? Were they? It sounds like they were super supportive. They wanted you to get it done, but
Mhm.
in terms of like being at the workplace, did they allow you some time to study? Could you? It was open office to sit down and break open books if you had a free minute, or like, what did that look like for you?
They might have allowed me to study, but I did not use time during work to study. So I was studying after work. So because I live on the West Coast, I have East Coast clients. So my work day is usually like 6 to 3 ish. And then afterwards, I would sit in the office and study for a couple hours. And I still play hockey. So I would study until I had to go leave and play hockey. So it was kind of a balance of this exposure during regular work hours for work, after work hours for self development, and then after studying for fun time was kind of how I broke it down.
That makes sense. When you were going through the course, what did you feel like was like the best thing that the course gave you in terms of your prep?
The conceptual questions, because I was terrified about those. So the in-depth conceptual book that is offered for Geo was amazing. And it allowed me to really understand and visualize what the questions were asking me because it was the CEA book was so, I don't want to say randomized, but it was so involved in different categories that I got a lot of exposure to different topics.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. Did you, for anyone that's taking geotech, sometimes they're disheartened by, they're looking at the passing scores, and geotech doesn't typically have the highest,
Right.
passing scores for first time takers or even repeat takers.
Yeah.
What kind of things would you encourage somebody that's preparing for geotech to know that they can do this?
I would say don't look at those numbers because if you look back at when you were in college, people were taking the FE without even studying. And I think people go into the geotech and they don't study the references and conceptual ideas enough. So you have people that are just throwing their hat in the ring, hoping that they pass. And I don't think that's a good gauge on how many people percentage wise are actually passing. I think if you study and understand how to find the information, you have a good chance of making it through.
That makes sense. Was there any surprises on the exam that took you off guard, or you feel like we helped prepare you?
There were a couple, but I'm sure they were practice for the next round of exams because I had no idea how to answer them.
The and I I guess it's true they throw in a couple that maybe are throwaways.
Yeah, so this year, this is kind of the first year of the exam where electric resistivity was kind of absorbed of the exam, and it's barely covered in any of the manuals, but that was a little bit more in depth than I was expecting it to be.
Wow, is that even on the specifications? I don't even remember.
Yeah, it's one bullet point underneath one of the sections. So I thought it was like a breeze because there's in one of the manuals, there's a 1 or 2 paragraphs that you have to read about. And it's kind of more, what is it? And I didn't think they'd ask any questions about that. So I'm hoping those are throwaway questions because they were way too involved for what I was studying. But
Well, that's interesting you say that because if you're in transmission, sometimes that comes up with resistivity in soil. So
Absolutely.
You're the underground guru now.
Yeah, it worked out nicely on my end for that.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I always love asking this question, but what was the day like when you saw your score?
Yeah, so I logged on, and before I hit the button to do the final log on and everything, I was expecting to see red inside of there. And I was like, oh, you know what? Let's just get it done early in the day. And I hit it, and there was 2 green bars, so for my FE and my PE. And I think I sat there for about 5-10 minutes, and I didn't talk to anybody, didn't say anything, and I just stared. I'm like, this is a mistake, right? I got to refresh the screen a couple of times. So after that happened, it took about 2 weeks because I'm still new on passing it, where my wife and I will look at each other and say, I can't believe I passed. I can't believe it's over. So it's an awesome feeling, and it's definitely nerve-wracking for that whole week while you're waiting for results.
It is. Yeah, well, it's way better than they used to be, or you were waiting for months.
I can't imagine waiting that long for it. So yeah, I'm happy the CBT gets it fast for you.
Yeah, it was those were rough times. Well, for someone preparing for the geotech, like you mentioned earlier, it is intimidating when they start looking at how many codes and standards they really have to know and
Yeah.
understand. Um, what tips or advice would you have for people that are trying to tackle this exam and they're overwhelmed by how many codes and standards there are? Do you feel like they need to read those cover to cover, or just kind of use them as they go through problems, or what advice would you have for them?
Reading them cover to cover is a great idea if you have like 4 or 5 years to study, but I don't think anyone's doing that much time. So if you can figure out what questions are being asked and then use that as a baseline to grow your reference, it's a great starting point. And then comparing the table of contents, because a lot of the material is repeated between different references. So the more you study and the more you're inside those references, the smaller the material actually becomes.
That makes sense. That's great tips and great advice for people that kind of feel overwhelmed when they see the amount of material they got to get. So, um, could you talk briefly about the support system you had when you were preparing for this exam? Sounds like your wife was on board. Was there anyone else that was on board with you taking this, and like how you held yourself accountable to do this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to have friends and families, but you don't want to tell too many people because then I feel like if I tell too many people, I almost feel like it's already done and I stop me feeling motivated internally.
Mm,
I didn't really tell anyone that it was happening until after I took the exam. So my family knew it was happening, my wife, my supervisor, and my mentor in the office as well. And besides that, I didn't even tell too many people at work that I was kind of studying. It wasn't affecting my work, and I didn't want to tell everybody. And then if I didn't pass, have this news of this cloud that I had to pass on. So the support system was there when I wanted it, but I purposely didn't reach out that much.
yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes people want the accountability, so they tell more people, and sometimes it's like I'm just gonna take it. I don't need to tell everyone and their dog. And
Yeah.
if I pass it, then I'll tell people. So good strategy there. Do you have any tips for people that maybe would have to repeat this exam? I know we've worked with people that have taken this, multiple times. So I'm just curious if you had any thoughts around somebody that finds themselves with the lack of motivation to keep this thing going.
It's worth it. And even though you might have to put a little bit more time to the side for studying, there is an end goal and it is tangible. You already took it once. You know what to expect. You know where your weak points are, and you can solidify your studying a little bit easier. So don't give up yet. I mean, there's definitely a chance. We have people in the office that took it 7, 8, 9 times until they finally passed. And you might just have a bad luck on one of the questions where it's harder than the other ones, but it doesn't mean you're not an engineer.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, those are great tips. This doesn't, failing doesn't define you. You can get through it, and if you need help, I noticed a lot of people end up finding us after they have repeated it, and we're happy to support them on that journey too.
Yeah.
So, I'm just curious also about your thoughts. Do you feel like Civil Engineering Academy did a decent job of supporting you through questions maybe you had, and did you feel like there was a proper support system there for you on the technical side?
There was. So I remember doing email exchanges with you or just generally sending out to the academy, and it would be a day or two, if that, and I was getting a response, and maybe I was doing an equation wrong, or maybe one of the answers didn't make sense. And it was very transparent to get something resolved if I didn't understand it. So it was not a waiting process. I didn't feel like I was just another random number in the inbox. I felt like I was a person that you were paying attention to. So that was appreciated.
Awesome. Yeah, we try to jump on that. We want to make sure everyone's feeling supported, whether it's
Absolutely.
through private community or email, whatever it is. So glad that helped out.
Definitely.
I'm also curious. So you graduated in New York. You took the PE in Oregon.
Correct.
And then you're applying to get the license there.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Oregon requires, but can you get your license then after 2 years of experience, or do you have to wait 4 years, but you can take the exam early?
That is correct. So I can take the exam early before my experience, but I can't apply until both criteria are completed.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. That'll be coming up soon, so you can get all that extra paperwork out of the way, and then you're going to work towards getting the next goal is California, it sounds like.
Yeah, being on the West Coast, we do a lot of work with California clients and things. So it'd be nice to have that just as a backup for our projects as well.
That's great. Well, Seth, any last second tips for those preparing for their PE or specifically for Geotech?
Even though it's difficult and seems overwhelming at times, it's a lot of fun learning about the material, finding out your grade, and then applying it in work. So after passing the PE, the imposter syndrome kind of disappeared inside of me for work. So I feel more capable. And instead of viewing things as hurdles, I view them as opportunities. So it's a lot more fun and engaging to be in work now. It always was, but now it's a little bit more. So yeah.
Yep. People are always surprised when I tell them this, but once you get back into study mode, you actually start enjoying it a little bit.
Yeah.
You went into this degree for a reason.
Mhm.
And when the problems start clicking and the stuff starts coming to you, you start actually enjoying it.
Yeah. Roughly.
That's awesome. Well, maybe the last question I have is, why would you recommend someone joining the Civil Engineering Academy course?
Like I said earlier, you're not just a number. So it's a real personal experience you get to be. And the bang that you get for the buck is incredible. I mean, I went after one of the other opportunities to learn about passing the PE exam, and it was underwhelming when I was able to receive from it. And the CEA was there for me and made me feel extremely prepared walking in for the exam. And the more resources and practice you can do, I mean, why wouldn't you want to do it? It's an amazing opportunity. So if you could get out there and really join the experience and be part of a close-knit group like CEA offers, it's incredible how much information you can get out of it.
That's awesome. Seth, this has been awesome. Thanks for joining. Congratulations again on passing. So excited for you. You can move forward. It's a huge monkey off your back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're excited for you. Go celebrate again, and appreciate you jumping on. Hopefully we'll talk to you in the future.
Thanks, Isaac. Thanks for everything you put together with CEA, and thanks for being available and bringing me on to this.
Thank you. We'll sit and talk to you later.
Definitely. Cheers.
See ya.